Captain Rex Razorthorn adjusted his combat suit as the amber light of Ocean's twin moons filtered through the dusty windows of the colonial headquarters. The outpost was barely more than a collection of prefabricated buildings clustered against the red rocks of Ocean's northern plateau, but it had become his temporary home during this peacekeeping mission. The unrest has been concentrated in the eastern provinces, Captain, the colonial administrator explained, pointing to a holographic map. The native population has grown increasingly hostile to our mining operations. Your mission is to stabilize the region and protect our personnel. Thorn, as his fellow officers called him, nodded tersely. He had done this before on a dozen worlds. Go in, show enough force to discourage rebellion, negotiate with local leaders, establish a sustainable peace, move on to the next hotspot. 20 years in the Galactic Peacekeeping Force had left him efficient and emotionally detached, exactly what the job required. I'll deploy my team at dawn, he said, memorizing the terrain. Have your intelligence officers prepared detailed reports on the rebel leaders. It was as he exited the command center that he first noticed her, a young Axionite girl with silver hair that seemed to catch the moonlight. She was lingering near the perimeter fence, watching the human soldiers with undisguised curiosity. Among the orange-skinned natives, she stood out with her slender build and striking features. Thorn paid her little mind. Young locals often gawked at off-worlders, especially armed soldiers. But the next morning, as his team prepared their land cruisers for deployment, she was there again, closer this time. "Are you the commander?" she asked in surprisingly fluent Galactic Standard, her accent giving the words a musical quality. "I am," Thorn replied curtly, not slowing his equipment check. "This area is restricted. You should return to the civilian zone." "My name is Ionra," she continued, undeterred. "I could help you understand my people. The Eastern tribes don't trust outsiders." Thorn glanced at her more carefully. She couldn't be more than 16 or 17 by Earth standards, dressed in a simple tunic that barely qualified as adult clothing in Axionite culture. Her eyes were large and golden, typical of her species, but held an intelligence that caught his attention. "This isn't a cultural exchange program," he said firmly. "It's a military operation. Go home." But Ionra didn't go home. Over the next week, she appeared wherever Thorn went, outside the barracks, near the command center, at the edge of the training grounds. She asked endless questions about Earth, about the Galactic Alliance, about Thorn's previous missions. Some of the younger soldiers found her amusing, even endearing. Thorn found her increasingly irritating. "The girl is smitten with you," Captain Lieutenant Reza teased after Ionra had brought local fruits to their checkpoint. "She follows you like a lost pet." "She's a child," Thorn replied coldly, "and a distraction we don't need." The situation came to a head when Thorn's team prepared for a night reconnaissance mission into rebel territory. As they were boarding their stealth skimmer, a small figure emerged from behind the fuel containers. "I can guide you," Ionra said, her silver hair gleaming in the floodlights. "The ravines have hidden sensors. The rebels will know you're coming." Thorn's patience snapped. He grabbed her by the arm and marched her away from the landing pad, his face tight with anger. "This ends now," he said firmly. "You're endangering yourself and my mission. This isn't a game. I'm not playing," Ionra protested, her golden eyes flashing. "I'm trying to help. I know things." "You're a child interfering with military operations," Thorn cut her off. "I don't have time for schoolgirl crushes or teenage heroics." Her face flushed a deeper orange. "I'm not a child. I'm old enough to." "To what? Get yourself killed?" "To compromise sensitive operations." Thorn's voice was harsh. "Go home, Ionra. Find someone your own age to impress." "There's no one like you," she whispered, her voice suddenly small. Something in her tone made Thorn pause. There was genuine feeling there, and for a moment, he almost felt sorry for her. But sentiment was a luxury he couldn't afford. "Come back when you're older," he said dismissively, "then we'll talk. Until then, stay away from my team and my operations." He turned and walked back to the skimmer, not seeing the tears that welled in her golden eyes or the way her slender hands clenched into fists. What he did notice, as the craft lifted off, was the silvery streak of her hair as she ran away from the compound, like a comet fleeing into the night. The mission proceeded as planned. Thorne's team neutralized 3 rebel outposts with minimal casualties, uncovered a weapons cache, and established a tentative dialogue with a moderate faction of the insurgents. When they returned to the colonial base 3 weeks later, there was no sign of Ionra. "The administrator's daughter asks about you," Lieutenant Reza mentioned casually. "Your silver-haired admirer. She'll forget about it," Thorne said, already focused on the next phase of their deployment. They always do. Within a month, the immediate crisis had been contained, and Thorne's team was reassigned. He left Ashian without a backward glance, the silver-haired girl already fading from his memory as just another footnote in his long career. He never expected to see her again. 5 years passed. Captain Rex Thorne, now a major after distinguished service in the Orion conflict, looked out at the approaching planet with a sense of déjà vu. Ashian's red surface and twin amber moons were unchanged, but according to the mission briefing, everything else had transformed dramatically. What had been a localized insurgency had escalated into a full-fledged civil war. The mining operations that had once been the colony's sole purpose had expanded tenfold after the discovery of rare isotopes, essential for faster-than-light travel. The Axionite population had split between those who embraced the economic opportunities and those who fought against what they saw as exploitation. The political situation has become extremely volatile, the new governor explained during the preliminary briefing aboard the orbital station. Helena Burke was a hard-faced woman with the calculating eyes of a career diplomat. The Ashian Liberation Front now controls nearly 40% of the planet's territory. "I remember them as disorganized rebels," Thorne remarked, studying the strategic display. "What changed?" "Everything," Burke said grimly. "They've acquired advanced weapons, tactical training, sophisticated propaganda. Intelligence suggests outside involvement, possibly syndicate or even draconian." The mention of draconian involvement changed the atmosphere in the room. The reptilian species was notorious for destabilizing developing worlds to gain strategic advantages against the Galactic Alliance. "Your mission is to strengthen our defensive position and gather intelligence on ALF leadership," Burke continued. "You'll be working with our diplomatic team, who have maintained communication channels." Thorne nodded, mentally calculating force deployments and security protocols. As the briefing concluded, he found himself thinking briefly of the young silver-haired girl who had once haunted his steps. He wondered if she had married some local boy, perhaps even sided with the rebels. The thought was fleeting, a momentary curiosity about a life that had intersected with his only briefly. The colonial headquarters had been dramatically upgraded, now a fortified complex with energy shields and automated defense systems. Inside the main conference room, representatives from various factions had gathered for an emergency council meeting. Thorne stood at attention as Governor Burke outlined the escalating security concerns. "Before we proceed, I want to introduce our chief negotiator with the ALF," Burke said, gesturing toward the entrance. "Her insights will be valuable to this council." Thorne turned with the others and felt time stop. The woman who entered the room bore little resemblance to the awkward teenager he remembered. Tall and graceful, she wore a fitted, diplomatic uniform that highlighted her slender figure. Her silver hair was elaborately braided in the Axionite style for formal occasions, and her orange skin seemed to glow with health and confidence. But it was her golden eyes, intelligent, assured, and unmistakable, that confirmed her identity. "This is Ionra Raelin," Burke continued, "our primary liaison with the moderate ALF factions." Ionra's eyes swept the room and locked with Thorne's. A flicker of recognition, followed by something unreadable, passed across her features. The faintest smile touched her lips. "Thank you, Governor," she said, her voice deeper and more measured than Thorne remembered. "The situation has indeed become critical. We have intelligence suggesting the ALF is planning a major offensive against the Western mining operations." Thorne listened as she outlined threat assessments and political complications with the precision of a seasoned intelligence officer. Gone was the impulsive girl who had followed him like a shadow. This woman commanded attention with quiet authority. The meeting stretched for hours as strategies were debated and security measures approved. Throughout it all, Thorne found his attention repeatedly drawn to Ionra, studying the transformation that 5 years had wrought. When the council finally adjourned, he deliberately positioned himself near the exit, knowing she would have to pass him. "Major Thorne," she said as she approached, her golden eyes meeting his directly. "It's been a long time." "It has," he agreed, searching for the right words. "You've changed." A smile played at the corners of her mouth. "I've grown up." As instructed. Before he could respond, she stepped closer, her voice dropping to ensure only he could hear. "I've grown up, Major. Now it's your turn to prove a man's word has value." The challenge in her voice sent an unexpected jolt through him. This was not the adoring girl he had dismissed so easily. "Perhaps we should discuss the security situation more thoroughly," he offered, unsure why he suddenly felt off balance. "Over dinner, perhaps?" Her smile widened. 7 o'clock, my quarters. The Eastern Compound, Level 3. She brushed past him, adding quietly, "There are things about the Alf that weren't appropriate to share in the council meeting." Thorne watched her walk away, aware that several other officers had noticed their exchange. The silver-haired girl had indeed come back when she was older, as he had so dismissively suggested. Now he found himself curious, and perhaps a little unsettled, about what else might have changed. At precisely 7, Thorne arrived at Ionra's quarters in the Eastern Compound. The door slid open at his approach, revealing a spacious room decorated with a blend of Axionite art and practical human furnishings. Ionra stood by a small dining table set for two, wearing a simple but elegant dress that highlighted her alien beauty in ways her diplomatic uniform had not. "You're punctual," she observed. "Military habits die hard, I imagine." "They keep you alive in my line of work," he replied, accepting the glass of dark liquid she offered. "You wanted to discuss the Alf?" She gestured for him to sit. "Yes, but first a toast. To growth and second chances." Thorne raised an eyebrow, but touched his glass to hers. The drink was sweet with a fiery afterburn, native Axionite spirits. He watched as she took a delicate sip and settled across from him. "I should apologize for my behavior 5 years ago," he began. Ionra shook her head. "No need. You were right about many things. I was young, inexperienced, overly romantic. The universe has a way of tempering such qualities. Nevertheless, I could have been kinder in my rejection." Her golden eyes studied him. "Perhaps, but then I might not have been motivated to prove myself. Sometimes harsh truths serve a purpose." The meal progressed, and Thorne found himself increasingly impressed by her intelligence and poise. She spoke of galactic politics with nuanced understanding and demonstrated intimate knowledge of both the colonial administration and the insurgent factions. "You're more than just a diplomatic liaison," he observed as they finished the main course. "Your insights are too detailed." Ionra's expression became serious. "You're right. This is why I wanted to speak privately." She activated a small device that emitted a soft hum. "Privacy field. What I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room." She leaned forward. "I'm a double agent, Major. For the past 3 years, I've been gathering intelligence on the Alf for galactic security." Thorne's hand instinctively moved toward his sidearm before he caught himself. "That's a significant revelation to share with someone you haven't seen in 5 years." "I've read your service record," she replied calmly. "Your actions during the Orion conflict speak to your character. Besides, I need your help. Go on." The Alf has been infiltrated and manipulated. What began as a legitimate movement for Axionite rights has been corrupted by outside forces. Syndicate weapons dealers initially, but now draconian military advisors. Her voice hardened. "They've established a hidden base in the northern mountains, disguised as an Alf stronghold, and they're planning something catastrophic." "What kind of operation?" "I don't know the details yet, but it involves technology beyond anything the Alf could access independently. I need to infiltrate the northern compound, but security is tight. They only allow known couples or families to approach the settlement." Thorne understood immediately. "You need a cover." I need a partner, she corrected. Someone with combat experience and tactical knowledge. Someone who can act convincingly as my lover while we gather the intelligence needed to stop whatever they're planning. He studied her face, looking for signs of the infatuated girl she had once been. There were none. This was a professional proposal from a trained operative. Why me? Why not another security agent? Something flickered in her golden eyes. Because despite our past, I trust you. And because your recent arrival provides the perfect cover. A human officer seduced by an Axionite diplomat would draw attention, but not suspicion. Thorne considered the proposition. It was dangerous, but potentially vital intelligence. And there was something else, a curiosity about this transformed woman that he couldn't quite dismiss. I'll need to inform Governor Burke. She already knows. Ionra cut in. She approved the operation, but left the final decision to you. Then I accept, he said. How do we proceed? Ionra's expression softened slightly. We begin building our cover tonight. You'll stay here, and tomorrow we'll be seen leaving together. Public displays of affection will be necessary. I understand. Good. She rose and walked to a cabinet, returning with a bottle. Then let's discuss the details, and perhaps get to know the people we've become. 5 years is a long time, Rex. It was the first time she had used his first name, and something in her tone sent a ripple of awareness through him. The mission parameters were clear, but as the night progressed and they talked of their experiences since the last meeting, Thorne found himself increasingly drawn to the intelligent, composed woman before him. When their planning was complete, Ionra showed him to a small adjoining room where he would sleep. At the doorway, she paused. Tomorrow, we begin our performance, she said softly. We should make it convincing. Before he could respond, she leaned forward and brushed her lips against his, a gesture he recognized as both a practical preparation for their cover and perhaps something more. When she pulled back, her golden eyes held a challenge. Good night, Rex. Alone in the small room, Thorne found himself thinking not of the mission ahead, but of the remarkable metamorphosis of the silver-haired girl into this compelling woman. Sleep was a long time coming. The next morning, they began crafting their public narrative. They shared breakfast in the colonial mess hall, sitting closer than necessary, speaking in low voices that invited speculation. Ionra's hand occasionally touched his arm or shoulder, casual gestures that nonetheless drew notice. We're being watched, Thorne murmured as they walked through the central plaza. 3 o'clock, the vendor with the red awning. Alf's sympathizer, Ionra confirmed without looking. Good. The word will spread. That evening, Ionra guided him to a gathering in the settlement's cultural district, a seemingly innocent celebration that she quietly informed him was a front for Alf supporters. The building was filled with Axionites and a smattering of humans who had gone native, as colonial slang put it. Most are genuine cultural enthusiasts, Ionra explained, pressing against his side as they navigated the crowded space. But the core organizers funneled weapons during the early insurgency. And now, Thorne asked, his arm around her waist in a gesture that felt surprisingly natural. Now, they're recruiting points and intelligence hubs. Watch the tall Axionite by the south wall, Krell. He's a cultural advisor from the northern provinces. Thorne followed her gaze and felt his blood freeze. The tall, authoritative Axionite she indicated was no native. Despite the orange skin pigmentation and cosmetic alterations to his features, Thorne recognized the subtle mannerisms and bearing. That's Drex Vaughn, he whispered against her ear. Draconian Special Intelligence. I encountered him during the Orion conflict. Ionra stiffened against him. Are you certain? Absolutely. He's responsible for the Cassini Station massacre. Over 2,000 civilians dead. Then our situation is worse than I feared, she murmured. The Draconians wouldn't commit an officer of his caliber unless something significant was planned. Krell, Vaughn, suddenly looked in their direction, his modified eyes narrowing slightly as he studied Thorne. He may recognize me, Thorne warned. Without hesitation, Ionra turned toward him, slipped her arms around his neck, and pulled him into a kiss. This was nothing like the tentative touch of lips the night before. This was passionate, convincing, A lover's desperate embrace that commanded the attention of those nearby and provided the perfect distraction. When she finally pulled away, her eyes held a mixture of professional satisfaction and something warmer. "Did it work?" she whispered. Thorne glanced over her shoulder to see Vaughn approaching, a calculating smile on his altered face. "We're about to find out," he replied softly, keeping his arm firmly around her waist. Ionra, the disguised draconian, greeted her, using her formal name. "I didn't expect to see you at our humble gathering." His gaze shifted to Thorne, and with such interesting company. "Krell," she acknowledged with a warm smile that revealed nothing of her awareness of his true identity. "This is Major Thorne, recently arrived from the Orion sector. He's been showing me a more human perspective on interspecies relations." The double meaning in her words brought appreciative chuckles from nearby listeners. Vaughn's expression remained calculating as he studied Thorne. "Orion sector? I believe we may have crossed paths before, Major." "I doubt it," Thorne replied easily. "I would remember." A tense moment passed before Vaughn's false smile widened. "Perhaps I'm mistaken. Memory can play tricks, especially across species." He turned to Ionra. "You should bring your human companion to our northern compound next week. We're hosting a traditional celebration that might educate him further about our culture." "We would be honored," Ionra replied smoothly. As Vaughn moved away, Thorne felt the weight of what had just occurred. They had been invited directly to the heart of the enemy operation, a perfect infiltration opportunity wrapped in deadly danger. "That was too easy," he murmured against her ear. "Not easy," Ionra corrected, her body still pressed against his for appearances. "Strategic. He wants to assess you more thoroughly, determine if you're truly besotted with me or a potential threat. And if he decides I'm a threat..." Her golden eyes met his, suddenly serious. "Then neither of us will leave the northern compound alive." They departed the gathering shortly after, maintaining their cover with casual touches and intimate gestures. Back in Ionra's quarters, they immediately began planning their approach to the northern base. "We'll need weapons," Thorne said, pacing the small living space. "Concealed but accessible. Difficult but possible," Ionra agreed. "More concerning is communications. The northern mountains have natural mineral deposits that interfere with standard frequencies. Emergency extraction? Non-existent once we're inside," she admitted. "We'll be on our own." The gravity of the situation settled over them. This was no longer a simple intelligence-gathering mission. They were preparing to walk into the stronghold of one of the most dangerous draconian operatives in the sector, with minimal backup and significant risk. "We should inform Governor Burke," Thorne decided. "Request a strike team on standby." Ionra nodded, activating her secure communication device. As they waited for the connection, she turned to him with an unexpected question. "Do you remember what you said to me the last time we saw each other?" 5 years ago." Thorne shifted uncomfortably. "I told you to come back when you were older." "And I did." Her golden eyes held his. "But I need to know something before we proceed. Is this," she gestured between them, "entirely professional for you?" The question caught him off guard. "What are you asking exactly?" "I'm asking if your perspective has changed. If you see me differently now." Thorne considered the question seriously. The infatuated girl had become a woman of remarkable capability and intelligence. Their pretend relationship had awakened something he hadn't anticipated, a genuine attraction and growing respect. "Yes," he admitted finally. "I see you very differently now." Something softened in her expression. "Good, because this mission requires absolute trust, and I needed to know if..." The communication device chimed, interrupting whatever she had been about to say. Governor Burke's stern face appeared on the small screen, and they turned their attention to planning the operation. Later that night, as they finalized their preparations, Thorne found himself watching Ionra. The confidence in her movements, the strategic brilliance of her mind, the quiet strength she embodied. The contrast with the impulsive girl who had once followed him around the base was striking. "You should get some rest," she said, catching his gaze. "Tomorrow we'll test both our acting abilities and our tactical skills." "Ionra," he began, suddenly needing to address what remained unspoken between them. "When this mission is complete, When it's complete, she interrupted gently, we can discuss possibilities. But not before. Clear minds are essential now. She was right, of course. Professional to the core. Thorn nodded and retreated to the small adjoining room. But sleep eluded him as his thoughts kept returning to golden eyes and the taste of her lips against his. The next morning brought unexpected news that changed their timeline completely. One of Ionra's intelligence contacts reported increased activity at the northern compound, suggesting the draconian operation was accelerating. We can't wait for their invitation, Thorn decided after reviewing the intel. Whatever they're planning, it's happening now. Ionra agreed. I'll notify our backup teams. We move tonight. Governor Burke authorized a special operations team to accompany them, with strict orders to remain outside the compound unless signaled. As dusk approached, Thorn found himself alone with Ionra for the final preparations. She handed him a small device to be implanted behind his ear. Short-range communicator. Subvocal activation. It should work despite the mineral interference. As she helped him position the device, her fingers lingered against his skin. Nervous? She asked softly. Focused, he corrected, though in truth, her proximity was proving distracting in ways he hadn't anticipated. Rex, she said, her voice suddenly. Serious. If something goes wrong, I want you to know that my feelings for you weren't just adolescent infatuation. Even then, I saw something in you worth caring about. Before he could respond, she leaned forward and kissed him. Not the passionate display from the gathering, nor the tentative touch from their first night planning. This was something else entirely. Genuine, vulnerable, and unmistakably real. When she pulled away, her golden eyes held no pretense. For luck, she whispered. 2 hours later, they were approaching the northern compound with Major Foster's strike team concealed in the surrounding forests. The structure was larger than intelligence had suggested, a sprawling facility built into the mountainside with minimal external signatures. Automated defenses, Thorn noted, studying the perimeter through enhanced optics, and sentries at all access points. As expected, Ionra replied. We'll use approach vector 3, the supply entrance. Their infiltration began with a calculated distraction, a small explosion at the eastern perimeter, far from their actual entry point. As guards rushed to investigate, Thorn and Ionra slipped through the supply entrance using access codes she had acquired from her intelligence network. Inside, the facility revealed its true nature. What had been disguised as a rustic Alf stronghold was in reality a high-tech draconian outpost with advanced weapons systems and sophisticated research equipment. We need to find the central control room, Ionra whispered as they navigated the dimly lit corridors. According to the schematics, it should be 2 levels down. They moved silently, avoiding patrols and using service corridors. When they encountered a locked security door, Ionra produced a countermeasure device that bypassed the system with disturbing ease. Galactic security tech? Thorn asked as the door slid open. Something like that, she replied with a small smile. Beyond the door, they discovered a vast chamber dominated by an ominous device, a massive gravitational disruptor surrounded by draconian technicians. At a monitoring station overlooking the operation stood Drex Vaughn, his false Axionite appearance discarded in the security of the base. His reptilian features were unmistakable now, his scaled skin gleaming under the harsh lights. Gravitational weapon, Thorn whispered, recognizing the technology from classified briefings. Planet Killer class. Target, Ionra asked, her voice tight. Thorn studied the display, screens visible from their hidden position. Coordinated disruption pattern. They're targeting the colonial settlement. This could tear the entire region apart. We need to disable it, Ionra decided. The power conduits, there. She pointed to massive energy feeds connected to the base of the device. Heavily guarded, Thorn observed. We need a distraction. Ionra's golden eyes met his, determination clear in her gaze. I'll create one. Give me your explosives. Too dangerous, he protested. We stick together. No time for debate, she countered. I'll draw their attention while you plant the charges on the power conduits. Trust me, Rex. Before he could argue further, She had slipped away, moving toward the opposite side of the chamber. Thorn watched in dismay as she deliberately stepped into an open area and allowed herself to be spotted by a guard. "Intruder!" The shout went up, and suddenly Ionra was surrounded, being dragged toward where Vaughn stood. The Draconian commander's face twisted in surprise and then malicious pleasure as Ionra was brought before him. "Ionra Illen," he hissed. "What an unexpected pleasure. Where is your human lover?" "I came alone," Ionra replied defiantly. "The fool was too drunk to notice me leave." Thorn recognized her performance, creating the perfect distraction while directing attention away from his potential presence. As guards clustered around the captured spy, he moved silently toward the power conduits, explosives ready. "I don't believe you," Vaughn said, gripping Ionra's chin. "Major Thorn has quite the reputation from the Orion conflict. He wouldn't be so easily deceived." "You overestimate him," Ionra spat. "Humans are simple creatures, easily manipulated by Axionite females, especially aging soldiers desperate for young companionship." Thorn winced at her convincing performance as he placed the first explosive charge on a primary conduit. "3 more to go." "Search the facility," Vaughn ordered. "Find a human." He turned back to Ionra. "Perhaps you'll be more forthcoming after some persuasion." The malevolence in his voice made Thorn's decision for him. He had placed only 2 of the 4 charges, but Ionra's safety took priority. Drawing his weapon, he emerged from cover and took down 2 guards with precision shots. "Step away from her, Vaughn," he commanded, moving rapidly to a defensible position as chaos erupted in the chamber. The Draconian's reptilian features contorted with rage. "So predictable," he snarled. "Sentiment is always a human weakness." Guards converged on Thorn's position as Ionra took advantage of the distraction. With a move too quick to follow, she broke free from her captor, retrieved a concealed weapon from her boot, and joined the fight. Her combat skills were impressive, fluid and lethal in equal measure. "The charges," she called to Thorn as they fought back to back. "2 placed. Not enough for complete destruction." "It'll have to do," she decided. "Detonator." He passed it to her while providing covering fire. Across the chamber, Vaughn had reached the weapon controls and was accelerating the activation sequence. "Cover me," Ionra ordered, breaking from their position to move closer to the gravitational disruptor. Thorn laid down suppressive fire as she sprinted toward the massive device. With Draconian guards closing in, she made a desperate dive, sliding beneath the main platform and attaching something to the underside of the weapon itself. "Run!" she shouted, activating the detonator as she rolled to her feet. The first 2 explosions took out the power conduits, plunging sections of the facility into darkness. The third explosion, from whatever device Ionra had planted, rocked the entire chamber, sending the gravitational disruptor tilting on its base. Alarms blared as they fought their way toward the exit, Ionra's unexpected combat prowess matching Thorn's tactical experience. They moved in perfect synchronization, covering each other's blind spots, anticipating each other's movements with uncanny precision. "Backup team, converge on the facility," Thorn ordered into his communicator as they reached the outer corridor. "Target the main power generators." They had almost reached the supply entrance when Drex Vaughn appeared ahead of them, plasma rifle raised. "You've destroyed years of planning," he snarled, "but you won't live to celebrate your victory." Thorn pushed Ionra aside as Vaughn fired, the plasma bolt scorching the wall where she had been standing. Before he could return fire, Ionra had already moved, launching herself at the Draconian with surprising speed. Her attack caught Vaughn off guard, and his second shot went wild. "Go," she shouted to Thorn. "The charges will trigger a cascade failure. This whole place is coming down." Instead of leaving, Thorn joined her assault on Vaughn, landing a solid blow that sent the Draconian staggering. Together, they forced him back, but the reptilian officer was formidable, his natural strength and combat training making him a deadly opponent. A massive explosion rocked the facility, causing supports to groan and ceiling panels to crash down around them. In the moment of distraction, Vaughn struck, his clawed hand slashing across Thorn's chest, cutting through his armor. "Rex!" Ionra cried out, her golden eyes wide with fear. The wound wasn't deep, but it slowed Thorn enough for Vaughn to gain advantage. The Draconian lunged forward, weapon raised for a killing blow. Ionra moved faster than seemed possible, placing herself between Vaughn and Thorn. With a precision that spoke of extensive training, she fired her weapon directly into the Draconian's chest. Vaughn's expression shifted from murderous rage to shocked disbelief as he collapsed. "Never threaten someone I love," Ionra said coldly as the Draconian's life ebbed away. The facility was coming apart around them now. Supporting beams cracked and buckled as the sabotage gravitational disruptor created localized anomalies throughout the structure. "We need to move," Thorn urged, pressing a hand to his wounded chest. Supporting each other, they navigated the collapsing corridors, narrowly avoiding falling debris and fleeing Draconian personnel. When they finally emerged from the supply entrance, Major Foster's team had secured the perimeter and was rounding up escaping enemies. "Target neutralized," Thorn reported as medical personnel approached to tend his wound. "The gravitational weapon has been destroyed." "What about Vaughn?" Foster asked. "Eliminated," Ionra answered, her golden eyes still fixed on Thorn with concern. "Permanently." As medics attended to his injury, Thorn reached for Ionra's hand. "You said something back there," he said quietly. "About love." A faint orange blush colored her cheeks. Combat situations often lead to emotional declarations. "Was it true?" he pressed. She met his gaze squarely, all pretense gone. "I told you 5 years ago, but you weren't ready to hear it. I've grown since then, but some feelings remain constant." Despite the chaos around them, despite the pain of his wound and the fatigue of combat, Thorn felt something shift within him, a wall crumbling that he hadn't even known he'd built. "I see you now," he told her softly. "Not as the girl you were, but as the remarkable woman you've become. And what I see—" He paused, the unfamiliar territory of emotional honesty challenging him more than any battlefield. "What I see is someone I could love." Her expression softened, and she leaned forward to touch her forehead to his, an intimate axionite gesture of affection. "That's a start," she whispered. The ground trembled beneath them as the Draconian facility imploded in a final catastrophic collapse, but Thorn barely noticed. In the midst of destruction, something new had begun to take shape, something he hadn't known he was searching for until a silver-haired girl had returned as promised. The celebrations were still ongoing in the colonial settlement when a previously undetected escape shuttle rose from the rubble of the Draconian base. Drex Vaughn, gravely wounded but alive through Draconian resilience, had dragged himself to the hidden craft. As the shuttle cleared the atmosphere, he locked targeting systems on the 2 figures responsible for his downfall, the human officer and the Axionite trader who had just emerged from the medical facility. "Die knowing you failed," he growled, activating the weapon's system with his remaining strength. From her position beside Thorn, Ionra spotted the incoming threat first. With reflexes honed by years of covert operations, she shoved Thorn aside and drew her weapon in one fluid motion. Her first shot struck the shuttle's weapon port, briefly destabilizing its targeting system. Her second shot, aimed with preternatural precision, hit the shuttle's exposed fuel line. The resulting explosion lit up the night sky like a new star being born, debris raining down harmlessly into the uninhabited mountains. "How did you?" Thorn began, staring at her in amazement. "Galactic security training," Ionra replied with a small smile. "They taught me to shoot after I left you. Semi-determination made me a natural." Thorn looked at the woman before him. The silver-haired girl who had once annoyed him with her persistent attention, now a skilled operative who had just saved his life for the second time in one day. "I loved you when I was 17, she said quietly, holstering her weapon. "Foolishly, perhaps, but genuinely. I came back because I wanted to prove something to you and to myself. And now," Thorn asked, "now I love you as a woman who knows her own mind," she answered simply. "Not as an infatuated girl, but as someone who has seen both your flaws and your virtues and chooses you anyway." In that moment, with the echo of explosion still reverberating through the mountains and the twin moons of Ossian casting their amber light over them both, Thorn did the only thing that made sense. He pulled her close and kissed her, not as part of a cover story or tactical necessity, but with genuine emotion that had been building since he had first recognized her in the council chamber. When they finally parted, he spoke the truth that had been gradually revealing itself to him throughout their mission. I love you too, Ionra, and I'm sorry it took me so long to see what was right in front of me. 1 year later, Ossian was a planet transformed. The destruction of the Draconian base and the revelation of outside manipulation had changed the political landscape dramatically. A peace treaty had been signed between humans and Axionites, guaranteeing equal representation and rights for both species. Rex Thorn, having resigned his military commission, stood on the balcony of the new joint embassy, watching the twin moons rise over the horizon. His new role as ambassador suited him better than he had expected. Building bridges rather than defending barricades had proven surprisingly fulfilling. Deep thoughts, Ionra asked, joining him at the railing. Her silver hair caught the moonlight just as it had when he first noticed her, but everything else had changed, including him. Reflecting on unexpected journeys, he replied, taking her hand in his. A year ago, I would never have imagined standing here as a diplomat rather than a soldier. Change keeps life interesting, she observed with a smile. Her position as Joint Security Director had been unanimously approved, her dual heritage and experience making her uniquely qualified to oversee the planet's defense. Speaking of change, Thorn said, reaching into his pocket, I have something for you. He produced a small box and opened it to reveal a ring, an exquisite blend of earth gold and Axionite silver, twisted together in a pattern that symbolized their two worlds united. Ionra, he began, suddenly finding himself nervous in a way combat had never made him. 5 years ago, I told you to come back when you were older. You did, and you changed my life in ways I never imagined possible. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Her golden eyes widened, then filled with emotion. Yes, she whispered. Of course, yes. As he slipped the ring on her finger, she smiled with a hint of her old mischief. I always keep my promises, Rex, and I always get what I set my heart on, even if it takes time. He drew her close, marveling at the journey that had brought them to this moment. I'm glad you came back, he murmured against her silver hair. Always, she promised, sealing the word with a kiss as Ossian's twin moons watched over them, witnesses to a love that had bridged time, space, and the boundaries between worlds.